This is what no one tells you about your first published novel. This is coming from a multi-time best-selling author who has many books out on the market and has educated authors for many years. And the first thing that they don't tell you is that this book probably won't be the one to make you famous. This is probably not going to be your biggest book. This will be your earlier writing. So it's not going to be as strong. It's not going to be as good. You're not going to have as much leeway with what you are doing. You are not going to have an established audience. It is going to take a really long time to establish your audience, and it's going to take a really long time for this first novel to take off. So even if you have a pre-order, even if you've been on social media, it takes time after your book is published for it to gain traction. My very first novel ended up being the number 7 book out of every book on Amazon. But it didn't happen immediately. My book was out for several months before that happened. I actually didn't gain popularity and traction until I had several books out and a big source talked about my book. So when you write that first book, please know it's going to take time. You're not immediately going to make money. You are not immediately going to get social media followers. You are not immediately going to get sales, even if you have a pre-order, even if you have an existing audience. It takes time to build that up. And your first book will be your worst written. It just will, because you will always gain new skills. And that doesn't mean it's a poorly written book. It just means you will grow. So if the first book that you put out is your heart book, please just know it probably won't be the most popular, because you're going to grow as a writer, as an author, as somebody with a community. You're going to do better with every subsequent book that you write. So that first thing is just your entry point into the industry. It's not going to be your best one. It's not going to be your most famous or most popular for most people. You are going to do better. You're going to grow. And this should be your best effort, but your best effort is going to get better and better and better the more that you write. So your first novel is a lot of work, and it's a lot of time. It's a lot of effort. And it's, again, not going to yield you very much. My very first novel hit number 7 on Amazon, but it took months of that, and I had to be talked about by Book Club. So leaning into ads, leaning into interviews, leaning into social media is going to help you grow. I started my author career well before social media was a big thing. We had like Instagram, we had a little bit of YouTube, but like not really. We had Facebook groups, guys, when I started. If I had TikTok when I first started, I mean, when I got on TikTok, I grew 28,000 followers very quickly. If I had done that with my first novel when I had it many years ago, it would have been a very wildly, drastically different career for me, because that blew me up very quickly. But I didn't have that type of following until TikTok came around many years into my author career. So know with your first book that it is going to be a lot of work. Pre-order isn't really important. You're not really going to get very far. Surprise releases are fine. So you can do a pre-order, but you don't have to do a pre-order. You can do whatever you want because it's your first one. You don't have the audience. You don't have the following. You don't have the engagement. And so even if your first, and this is really important, even if your first book is a total flop at first, it doesn't freaking matter. This is the least amount of eyes on you that you will ever have. Mess up with the first one. Make the mistakes, try things out, test things, put all of your effort into throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks, because now is the time for you to figure out what's going to work, what's going to help, and what's going to help you to grow. Your first novel really is like the first pancake. We're not going to throw it away. It's still going to be great. It's still going to taste good. But it is your tester. It is the one that's just getting you into this industry. And the one caveat to that is if you are a traditional publisher and you got picked up for a big contract and you have a big publisher guiding you down the path, then you'll probably do well because you're not the one doing it. You have a tried and true tested system that someone else is doing for you. And even so, it may not be your big name, big famous, big sale book. You may have to get several of them out there. You may have to have your entire series out there. In fact, most people don't even try a series until they know the entire series is going to be out there, because we've watched again and again and again as the big 5 publishers have put out a series, put out the first book, and it didn't make the sales that they thought, so they canceled the second book, or even worse, they just canceled the third book. They had the first book, they kind of took on the second book, but they just said, nah, we're not going to finish this. And so readers have been burned a lot. They will not read things. They won't even start things unless it's incredibly hyped up on social media, or the entire series is out so they know they're not going to get burned. So you have to put a lot of work and effort into that first novel. But it is important to remember, your first novel does not define the success of your career. It is the first attempt, the first foray into the publishing space, your first trial of these things. You will not get good at what you do until you've done this at least 3 times. You have to do it again and again and again and again. You have to keep moving forward. You have to keep doing things. So do not harp on that first book. And for the love of all things, do not have a big gap of time between your first book and your second book. If you wait a long period of time, that is like the kiss of death in this industry. You must be moving forward. You must be putting out more content. You must be continuing to grow. You must have more options for people, because if they like one book, they're going to buy another book. You got to get things out as quickly as possible. Your growth is directly proportional to how much work you're putting out into the industry. And that is on your social media marketing. It's on your ads. It's on the number of books you're putting out. The way that you are growing is scaled based on what you're creating and how you're putting that out into the world. So your first book is a fun, exciting adventure, but you also need to remember, nobody cares until you're somebody. And so you have to do things for yourself. If you want a book launch party, you must make it, and you must bring people. If you want a fun launch day, you have to make it that way, because nobody's doing it for you. You're not going to be getting those sales. You're not going to be getting those hardcore fans, especially if you've never put anything out before. They still have to have time to read the book. So if you want to make your first launch special, you must put in that work and effort, and you must romanticize it and make it beautiful for yourself, because it's not going to become a thing for you until you are well into your author career. And then people are going to show up to celebrate and do all the fun things, and you won't have to do quite as much. But that first book, man, it is your entryway into the industry. It is fun. It's a lot of work. It doesn't yield a lot of results, and you've got to keep pushing forward if you want to succeed with this. But that's not all you need to know about the publishing space. You need to know what happens when you reach your 5th book. You need to know what happens when you reach your 10th book. So this is a little mini series. Congratulations, come back. We are going to be doing more episodes on this. I'm actually filming them back to back, and I think I'm going to release them back to back so you see what happens with book 5 and with book 10, and we can continue the conversation from there to help you manage your expectations getting into this industry, because this shiny, sparkly version of author life that people have before they get into the industry is radically changed the second you get into this industry and that curtain is pulled back, and it's still sparkly, but it's sparkly in different ways. It was not what you were expecting. And so we want to manage those expectations so that you can plan properly to make the most of your author life. So we'll see you in tomorrow's episode as we continue to have this conversation and help you navigate the world of your author life.